Hello, tribe. Michelle Norris here. I am really honored to bring to you today a really good friend of mine. Um, I know it's funny that we say like we're honored and whatever, but you know what? I feel super blessed to be surrounded by the people that I'm surrounded with and who I do life with. And so it is really my honor to bring these people to you so that you get an opportunity to learn from them, and particularly their wisdom and their personal, unique genius and expertise. Because um, particularly right now, I can tell you that it's been of utmost importance to have people like my friend that's you're going to be hearing from here shortly in my life, and able to really talk to them about what's happening right now and what's happening for me. And I can tell you that Lee Noto, who is my good friend that you're going to be hearing from today, is one of me and Keith's coaches. She's a coach in conscious connection and particularly intimacy, and she works with couples and people who have issues with that, but particularly relationship. And right now we're going to talk about that today for people like Lee being in my life. And because I've had a lot of people reaching out and saying, we just really appreciate how positive you are and how you're just really putting so much light and energy and everything into the world. And I can tell you it's because I have people like this behind the scenes that are actually, I get an opportunity to talk to them, and they help me through this process so that I can stay that light and I can stay in that type of positive energy for all of you and for the tribe, because it's so important. And so I'm deeply honored, Lee, that you agreed to come on here today. And I so appreciate the work that you and Ani is her partner, that they do, not just with us, but with others. And so thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. It is such a blessing, and I know it's going to be a blast to be here. I'm really excited to jam.
Yeah. So one of the things that we were talking about is that, right now, it's really interesting. We spend time with our family at the holidays, and we're okay with that. Because there's an end in sight. We know how much time we have to deal with family. And right now, we have this situation upon us where there's no foreseeable end in sight. And so that can get very trying, and it can become very problematic. And so one of the reasons that I had Lee come on is because she can give us tips and advice around creating connection right now, and creating opportunity to build the relationship, and to also deal with conflict, because that's going to happen. We're in close quarters with a bunch of people that we love and everything, but sometimes it's a lot easier because you have separate time and you're not getting that. And so anyway, Lee, right now, we're stuck at home I know, like, particularly Lee's in Austin, I'm in Austin, where the mandate came down at midnight last night that we are all required to stay in our homes only for, emergency situations and absolute necessities, going out and going to the store, that kind of thing, to the pharmacy. And so tell me, you're in the same situation. What are you doing yourself to try to make sure that you build connection and you take care of conflict before it happens or as it's happening?
Right. This is such a timely question and point of exploration, because not only does what I'm going to share apply now, it applies to when we go back to whatever new normal will take shape once this is all said and done. And so there are a few keys here, and I'm going to start with the really practical, because the practical is what really matters, especially in moments of conflict. So first things first is taking some space for yourself. This is a huge one. Now, we have various home layouts where maybe we're in a one bedroom, a studio, maybe we have multiple bedrooms. Taking some space for yourself, sharing and communicating like, hey, I'm going to go do my thing in the office for 30 minutes. I'm going to go meditate. I'm going to go take this call. This is so important because we used to not have to manufacture this alone time. And we used to not have to manufacture social time because it was built naturally into our schedules by going into an office or by going to the grocery store. Now we are being asked and, perhaps forced to create that time for ourselves with intention. And when we do not create that time for ourselves, it yields one outcome. And when we do, it yields another outcome. Neither is good, bad, right, or wrong. They just yield different results. So something that I've shared with all of my clients and all of my friends and family members is creating the kind of structure that supports us in our normal day-to-day. So having some sort of morning routine and having some sort of evening routine that bookmark the day. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it can definitely feel like everything is all melting together. And so I found it particularly helpful to journal in the morning, to really create what I want to have in my day, to create what kind of person I want to be that day, to create how I want to show up for my work and my clients. So having that morning routine. The next one is communicate, communicate, communicate. Now more than ever, we have the opportunity to hash things out, the things that we have been avoiding, the issues that have been under the surface, the things where, on a normal basis, we might have said, screw this, I'm going to go to yoga instead. You're not going to yoga anymore. You're staying home. And so Ani and I, we have had to innovate in our communication style as a result of this happening. So here's what I mean by that. Things that we would not have otherwise communicated about before, we are now super diligent to communicate about. So because we're both working from the same space, this might sound something like, hey, honey, I'm really hungry for lunch, but I know you have a call coming up. Is it okay that I'm in the kitchen cooking eggs while you're at the start of this call? I just want to let you know what's happening. And normally we wouldn't have to communicate about those things because we're not in the same space. It is uber important that we over communicate even during this time so that we can be on the same page. Even the things that we think are ridiculous to talk about. In my opinion, I'd rather overshoot this than have to deal with the repetitive nature of the same conflict happening over and over again. Mm-hmm. So creating routine and schedule, over communicating, taking time for oneself, and moving the body and nourishing as best as you possibly can with what you have. And so even if you're laying a yoga mat down in your home and doing some stretches or body weight movements, and even if you're eating canned vegetables or frozen vegetables right now, doing what you can to stay as nourished and replenished as possible, because that is going to help the human organism not only to be supported in our immune function, but also in how we show up for ourselves, for our partners, for our families. All of that really matters right now.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. So one thing, if you have conflict come up, because, as you know, and I'm really transparent about things. And so I believe that so many other people are probably in the same situation that we are. Mm-hmm. Keith and I have had some pretty serious conflict come up in the last week and a half, and personally between the two of us. And it's weird because we generally don't have that happen. We don't have those kind of things happening, but we've had it in the last week and a half. And it's, I think, the heightened sense of stress, mm-hmm. Just, the collective stress, the collective fear, all of that is there, whether or not we're actually actively participating in it. We can't undo that, and it is going to have an impact on us. So I know that for us, we had kind of a meltdown about a week and a half ago that we were both like, wait, whoa, what is happening? Like, mm-hmm. We don't do this. It doesn't happen. So what kind of tips do you have for resolving some conflict or trying to keep yourself in a positive space when conflict is happening? Because that can be very difficult right now.
Right. Absolutely. And it's interesting because this time is bringing up all of the conflict. There is, I believe, something happening in the larger cosmic picture of this that is having us look at what is there to be loved and witnessed and resolved. And so it's no mistake that a lot of conflict is happening right now. I'm going to start with some of the outer layers. Once we're in the moment of conflict, our window for pivoting and moving is smaller than when we are outside of the conflict. So when we are not in conflict, it's really important to create a set of agreements with one another. So you're in a neutral state, and in fact, perhaps you're even in a loving state. Sit down and have the conversation where you can look back on something with neutrality and observe, okay, that last argument that we had, that last conflict, what was that about? Can we observe at what moment did you feel triggered? At what moment did you feel something in your body start to shift? At what moment did you feel your chest start to tighten? Or what did you feel? When did you feel like you stepped over the edge? And so we're arriving at the looking back on the conversation around the conflict with curiosity, with wonder, with neutrality, so that we can start to understand what was happening in the situation. Once we can start to look back and see the patterns that have been happening over the past 3 weeks, then we can start to say, and I'm going to use an example from my life because Ani and I have had some pretty gnarly conflict and elevated emotions on this end too. But we can start to look back and say, hey, I noticed that when I give you feedback, your immediate response is a defense or a denial. Okay, and so that was something that he shared with me. But first what he did was he asked, are you open to receiving feedback about our argument from yesterday? Yes, I give permission. I feel safe in my body to receive his observation. Then he says, okay, I notice that when X, then Y. Does that feel true for you? Because this is his perspective. He's asking, does it feel true for me? And when I'm in a neutral state, I can observe. So I'll say, wow, I really notice that every time you give me feedback, I become defensive because it feels unsafe for me to receive that because I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to be imperfect because then it, in my mind, screws up my chances of being loved. And I cannot not be loved because that would be the death of me. And that's what our brains process. And so we go back and we observe and we see the patterns that are playing out. That's the first part. That's the outer layer. When we're in the moment of conflict itself, or actually, let me take one step back. In that observation, we want to create agreements. So, hey, we understand that conflict is a natural part of life. Disagreement's a natural part of life. What commitment are we giving on each of our behalves to how we're going to show up if and when conflict arises? Okay, so my commitment is when I notice that I start to tighten in my chest and my stomach starts to turn, I realize I'm going into fight or flight and I want to attack. And then I notice that I start to shut down and I freeze. When that happens, I'm going to stand up and I'm just going to move my body. That's my commitment. And then he makes a commitment as well about when he starts to get elevated. And that making that agreement creates just an expansion in the window of time for me to ask myself, how do I want to proceed? Do I want to go down the same rabbit hole that I always went down, which is becoming defensive, denying, and then lashing out? And I certainly can do that. But being true to my commitment and saying that I'm going to move my body and change my physical state changes my neurological state. And that then gives me a window for choice. And that's what this is all about, is choice. It's not about doing it perfect. It's not about being the good girl or good boy. It's about understanding that as sovereign beings, we have a choice. We always have a choice. And when we can open the window of choice in our bodies, then we can act and choose differently in our relationship. So, yeah.
Well, I just wanted to kind of like jump on here so everybody kind of understands. So this is the thing, when you go into fight or flight, the majority of people end up immediately shutting off their ability to get access to their prefrontal cortex, which is where you make good decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that fight or flight, like she was talking about. When you get in fight or flight, you're cutting that off because in the past, in our ancestry, we needed that ability to shut that off, to just act, to just be able to act from our primal. Basically, it's like our primal brain, our primitive brain. We needed to be able to just work from the amygdala just to keep us alive, because generally we either had some kind of big saber-toothed tiger after us or whatever. The problem is now we operate from this state a lot,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us. And I'm not preaching at anybody, because I can definitely say I've definitely operated a lot from fight or flight. But this is the way that you kind of circumvent that and start training, because this creates neuroplasticity, but you start training your brain to slow down and take that moment. So like she said, opening that window gives you access to the prefrontal cortex, where you can actually make the decision before you allow your body and your brain to take over fight or flight.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And something I'll share that is super helpful, that, I had to sort of graduate into the level of being able to switch quickly and create the choice. What I had to do at first, which felt necessary for my human organism to feel safe, was I needed to lay my hands on my body. When I started to feel the elevation of my nervous system, I needed to let myself know that I was safe. And yes, does my logical brain see that I am physically safe from harm? Absolutely. But this is not a function of the intellect. This is our animal body. And so there were a few times when we were in, an elevated place where I had to remove myself from the room. And I remember one practice that I keep in particular. I would go into a separate room, crawl up on the bed in fetal position, and I would wrap my arms around myself, lay on my side, and rock myself the way a mother would rock her child. Mm-hmm. And I would say a few simple phrases that any child would understand, which is, I love you. You are safe. Everything's going to be okay. And there was one more. I love you. You are safe. Everything's going to be okay. I've got you. Mm-hmm. And so very simple, not intellectual. And I just lulled myself there back to the place of feeling safe in my body. And then my prefrontal cortex came back online, and I was able to re-enter the room and have the kind of conversation that my adult self wanted to have. And so safety might be the first bit in there for anyone who's getting into that state of elevated emotion, is letting ourselves know that we're safe.
Oh yeah, definitely. And for all of you that are watching, please feel free to put questions in the comments so that we can get Lee to answer those questions now. If you have questions particularly about any kind of particular issue you have, I'm sure you're not alone. There's probably other people that would benefit from hearing the answers she has for that, or around the tips and everything that she's giving for dealing with conflict, and for just creating the opportunity and space for you to have the ability to operate not in fight or flight, but keep yourself in your parasympathetic so that you can make really good decisions and create connection right now. Because physical distancing for a lot of us is super hard. Like, it's really difficult to be separated from people who you are used to seeing on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes just a lot of people are probably feeling trapped right now, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that feeling at all. But the thing that we want to do is help people figure out how you can feel okay in that place. So if you have questions, please. Hey, Frank, it's so great to see you on again. But if you have questions, please put them in the comments and we'll have Lee answer those. And even if you're watching on replays, same thing, put questions in the comments and I can always have Lee come back and answer those at a later time. And the other thing is that, Lee will be speaking at Hula Effects, and would love for you guys to get a chance to meet her. these are like the people we talk all the time about, our life team. Bonnie and Lee are part of our life team. These are the people that we like really trust and who really we go to in times of conflict where we are struggling and everything. So she is amazing. So is her partner. And I just, want to talk about that. But anyway, so back to what we were saying is, right now we're just feeling kind of trapped and disconnected. What do you have? What are some ideas that you've had for around creating connection to people that you're physically distanced from right now?
Yes. So thank goodness for technology.
Yes.
They didn't have this accessibility during the plague the first time around. So we're doing, I think, better than they were back then. So really utilizing technology for its power has kept so many people connected during this time, even though it's not in physical proximity. And, we've come up with all sorts of cool creative ideas. And I've seen friends of mine post about this everywhere, everything from virtual dinner parties with friends across the country and across the world, virtual dance parties, small groups meeting up on platforms like Zoom or Google Hangouts or FaceTime. And what I've been hearing from people is that they actually were not big before on talking on the phone or FaceTiming, and now they love it. And so creating those dates and times to get together with your core group of friends or with someone you haven't caught up with in a while. And if you're in a larger group, creating some sort of theme so that everyone has a chance to participate and chime in and share a bit about their experience. So utilizing technology to its max right now is really allowing a lot of people to stay connected. And then as far as connection within the household goes, because this is a big point of contention that I've heard from many clients right now, that, some people are handling this really well and some people are feeling more disconnected than ever being in such physical proximity with people. Again, coming back to the taking our own space and really being relentless in creating space for oneself during this time. And then I have some peripheral practices that from a physiological standpoint have allowed me to keep my heart open during this time. And so one of the things that I noticed in the neutral observation of myself is that as soon as conflict would arise, I would shut down. So I would surpass fight or flight and I would go directly into freeze. And what happens in freeze is our body releases chemicals that numb us because the body thinks it's about to undergo death. And our body's intelligence doesn't want us to have a painful death. So it secretes chemicals and we go numb. And that was my MO. And so one of my practices in keeping my heart open right now, which was a brilliant suggestion by Ani, was to start habituating my physiology through taking cold showers. And in the cold shower, after the end of my hot shower, I imagine my heart remaining open as I take a deep breath, a diaphragmatic breath, expanding my belly out and deep and slow. And I imagine my heart remaining open. And this starts to work with my physiology to align with the emotional state that I want to create, especially when conflict arises. And so that's one sort of peripheral practice that has been working miracles in my life.
Wow. Okay. So how do you get past the whole cold shower part?
Work your way up.
I appreciate Wim Hof, and at the same time, I don't do cold thermogenesis. It's like I will do a cold shower during the summer after I get out of the sauna. But that's because that's the only time that I can seem to do it. It's so fun. So anyway, sorry, just trying to add a little levity because that I'm awful about the whole cold shower thing. But anyway, please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, even with the cold shower thing, it's a very gradual process. So I would just slowly turn the nozzle down a little colder or a little less warm, a little less warm, a little less warm until I find my edge. And I'm like, ooh, okay, this feels challenging.
Yeah.
And I am actually not doing the Wim Hof breathing before going into it, which may or may not be recommended from a physiological standpoint, but I'm doing very slow, deep diaphragmatic breaths, which may actually be what he does during the practice. And I'm just getting to my edge and I'm passing it a little bit. So I'm not going from scalding hot to freezing cold immediately, but I'm just doing what I can to meet my edge and take a little step over
Yeah.
with temperature and then with the amount of time that I stay in the cold shower. And so I'm finding my capacity is expanding. And as my physiological capacity expands, so too does my emotional capacity, especially as I'm visualizing, okay, ooh, my heart's open, my belly's expanding, I am safe, I am okay. And what I found, especially in my first few cold showers when I started this practice, was as I stepped just beyond my edge, I started to cry
Oh,
because the emotion that was being stuck in my body now had a chance to release because I was going beyond my edge. And my body was like, well, you're going to go beyond your edge. Here it is.
yeah.
And out came the tears. And it was so cathartic.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. That is one of the things that I love about some of these practices is that we go through life just holding in our emotions, constantly feeling like, okay, I can't be vulnerable. I can't do that in public. I can't cry. I should always be strong. I should, do all of these things. I love how we should all over ourselves, but this is how we operate on a normal basis. But when you go through practices like this, where you can have the opportunity to let your body know it's safe and that you can do this and that it's going to be okay, it's so great to get any of that emotion or even trauma out of your body so that you don't end up storing that for a later disease.
Right.
Yeah. So I so appreciate that because I know that's been particularly through our work with plant medicines and everything. It's been great for Keith and I to be able to learn how to release trauma from our body as it happens. And so like conflict that we had a week and a half ago, it was an opportunity for us to be able to release that, and we've been able to talk through all of that, and like you said, coming to those agreements. Okay, can we agree on this when we are outside of that conflict, and being able to work with each other to release whatever it is that we have going on, so there's just an edge in the air, and knowing that there's something that just needs to be let go. So.
Right. Absolutely. And as you were saying that, what came to me was when we find ourselves in these places of conflict or elevated emotion, clearing that charge immediately and letting the activation cycle complete is so important, because if it doesn't come out, where does anybody think it's going? It's staying in the body. And so nature is a perfect example of this. When an antelope narrowly escapes the grips of a cheetah, it will find its way to safety and it will shake.
Yep.
And children do this too. But once we've discovered that this is socially unacceptable, we don't do it. So we hold it in and we constrict. So I keep a shaking practice myself, that after something jarring happens, I will stand up, I'll hop around, I'll shake, I'll flutter my lips, I'll make sounds, and I'll just let it all out. And so that's hugely important in just letting the body do what it wants to do, which is express.
Right.
And at that rate, it doesn't have to then be spewed out at someone. It can still come out, which is what it wants to do, but it doesn't have to come out in a hurtful, harmful way. And that's super important. And then if you're in a home space, which we all are right now, if a conflict has arisen, it's super important to try and not have conflict in the place where you sleep or the place where you work, because your body will become habituated to constricting in that place when you're meant to be relaxing or focusing. So perhaps even choosing an area to have conversation. Like, hey, when we have this conversation, we're always going to do it, in the living room on this part of the couch. And that's where we agree we're going to go to. And it becomes a ritual, to have a conversation where you're working through something. And then it doesn't have to be some crazy thing that we're avoiding at all costs. It's okay, we're arriving at the ritual again, where we feel some things in our body, and we're going to go to the ritual space to witness and resolve these things. And then once we're complete there, giving our gratitudes to the space, to ourselves, to one another, and clearing the space, either mentally, like, okay, thank you, we're now clearing the space, or with Palo Santo, with sage, with a crystal of your choice, to really sort of seal that situation and bring it to a close.
Yeah, I can agree with you more around all of that. It's funny because I talk about this a lot, particularly if I'm on other Facebook Lives or on podcasts or whatever, is that mechanism that we have as humans to release trauma. It's no different than animals. The problem is that we, like you said, we learn that it's socially unacceptable. And so we even stop this now in our children. And it's that whole thing when a child, starts crying or falls or hurts their knee or whatever, and they start to cry, the first thing we want to do is grab hold of them, tell them to stop, tell them instead of letting them have all the feels, let them do what they need to. I saw, maybe it was you. Did you send it to me? I think maybe you did. There was a video of a father that just sat and held space for baby. I think the video went on for like 15 minutes and it was time lapsed. And so it was, but this mother just sat there and held space and let the baby just cry and kick and scream and hit and whatever. And then the baby finally crawled up in his arms and just kept sobbing. And whatever it was, it just needed to happen. And the problem is we want to stop that. We want to stop crying. You don't need to cry, blah, 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 blah. I mean, and I'm guilty of this because I did this to my kids too. Are you bleeding? Then stop crying,
Right.
And now I'm like, oh man, I totally circumvented a mechanism that is innate and built into our systems for us to be able to release that, because science shows that all trauma, all disease can be charged all the way back to some type of trauma in our body that was never released. And so, let your kid cry, I do this. This is what's funny. I let my dogs do it. Like they get into a fight, I'm like, I just let it go. I'm just like, until it gets really, really bad, I just will let them go because they need to get the energy out of their body. And that's the thing. As humans, we're really not a lot different. We need to get that energy expelled and transmuted and out of this physical being to be able to breathe again and to get back into our parasympathetic and get back to the prefrontal cortex and be able to, just become human again.
Right. And we have so many examples of this. Think about a time in your life where you had the most epic, mind-blowing orgasm. How did you feel after? That was a release of energy. That was something being activated, going all the way through your being and releasing. And then you have this cathartic feeling that glazes over you. Or a time when you were laughing so hard you were in stitches. And then when you're done, you're like, oh God, I feel so good.
Yeah.
Or even a time when you screamed at the top of your lungs. And, we hope that it's not at someone, but if you're out in nature and you're doing some primal screaming and grunting, what happens after that expression is a feeling of relaxed, a feeling of the body being relaxed and released and grounded again.
Oh yeah. I'm definitely all about getting all of that energy out now that I really understand all those mechanisms and everything. I definitely am a proponent of that and definitely allowing that to happen. And the other thing is too, is that, there are times where especially in the last couple of weeks, I have got to say some of the memes and some of the jokes that have come out of COVID-19 have been spectacular. Like,
Yes.
people are super creative. I have like gotten to the point where I was laughing so hard I was crying. And that kind of release was so cathartic too, is that when you can get to that point where you're just bawling, it's so funny. And so I don't know, as humans, it's really great to have those mechanisms to be able to release from. And the thing is that we need to use them all. We need to
Absolutely.
stop them all. So we're all trying to stop them all. And
Yeah.
I think there's probably nothing more amazing than watching somebody go through, especially when we've been in plant medicine space or whatever, is watching somebody really go through their process and holding space to allow them to release. It's a beautiful thing to watch. I've really particularly in and joy is not the right word, but really just felt very blessed to be in situations where you watch somebody go through their process and you knew that they had just this tremendous and amazing release.
Yeah. And you're so spot on with that. And a practice that I'll share that has been so impactful and powerful for me is something that I had to learn to create, because I would let myself get to my boiling point and then beyond, and then it would come out in a way that I didn't want it to come out. Mm-hmm. So especially if you are someone, anyone really, but if you know that this happens for you and your release doesn't come until you watch the really sad movie or until the conflict is so grave that you're shouting at someone, there are some practices that you can put into place to allow your body the gift of release in the safety of your own space, whether someone is there or not, in a way that is really alchemizing to the emotions and to us as beings. And so 3 major ways that we move energy through our body are through breath, sound, and movement. Mm-hmm. And so I combine all 3 in this practice, but this is when I know that I've got something held in me, but I'm so resistant to surrender that I can't cry. Why can't I cry right now? I need to cry. My body feels like it needs to get something out. And so I'll, take a space that's not disturbing anyone, because sometimes it gets loud. And I will start with breath, and I will just start with deep breaths down into the abdomen and out. And then I'll start to speed the breath up, and this starts to rev the emotions. And I say this, I share this practice, and for those who are listening, do this to the extent that your body feels safe to do it. If at any point you feel like, shaky, then pause and take a moment for yourself. People are going to come at this, at all different levels. So taking deep breaths in and out. And then after a few breaths, starting to let some sound come out. And I'll do this a little quietly because Ani's on a call in the other room. But taking a breath in, and then and it's that low, grunty, primal sound, because that's where this energy is coming from, this want to create and destruct and fucking burn the house down, especially in moments of anger.
I want to say this because I know that when you do that too, you should feel the vibration and the resonance in your body when you're doing that. So anyway, I just
So starting to make sounds, and it can be humming. Eventually, I've gotten really creative with this. So I'll go, and whatever sound comes out, like there's no judgment here. I've gotten into hissing sounds and barking sounds and animalistic sounds. And then I find the emotion starts to come. And this is when the emotional release happens. As I'm in this space that I've created, the emotion starting to come up for release. And sometimes I feel called to move with it. So I might move my body this way. I might throw my arms up and then throw them down. I've had many moments where I've set pillows up on the bed and I've gone ape style on the pillows and punched the pillows and pounded the pillows. And it was, again, a very cathartic release that allowed the expression out and not out at someone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important, especially right now when when we're in such close confines and we're kind of relegated and under house arrest a little bit. It's definitely so important to be able to have those opportunities to take that time and space for yourself. And
Yeah.
thank you so much, Lee, for coming on and discussing all of these things and such great tips and tricks to really work through these processes and everything. And again, you guys, if you have questions for Lee, please put them in the comments. I will have her come back and respond to them later. And if you know somebody that is in this situation, please share this information. Right now, we're all in this together. Even though we're like collectively separated. One of the things we've been talking about is we don't want to call it social distancing. We want to call it physical distancing, because we're having the opportunity to be social with each other through like what Lee was talking about earlier, technology and all these things. It's a really great time to get creative around how you socially interact with those that you love and who are part of your tribe and your friends and all of that. And so just please share this out as you see fit. If you have someone that you know really is struggling, that this could help them, because we want to, at the end of all of this, we want everybody to come through as whole and happier and better people. And I think this is our real opportunity right now for us to do that, and for us to really take the time to create these practices for ourselves that we get to use ongoing, not just during this time, but ongoing, because these are great practices no matter what's happening in the world, and no matter because even when the world's all great and the economy is wonderful and everybody's got jobs and nothing like this is happening, there's still stuff that happens in your program, tips and tricks throughout your life to be able to create really conscious connection and intimacy with those that you love. And so thank you, Lee, for coming on. I so appreciate you so much. And you know how much me and Keith love you and Ani, and appreciate, just the opportunity to do life with you. And, we actually have a virtual dinner party tonight together. So yay. So anyway, you guys, we will be back again soon. And so please, again, share with everybody, and please take care of yourself and take care of each other. We love you, and we'll see you again later.